You see him? Clancy asked Roger, the two of them crouching behind the fence. Shut up. He's gonna hear us, Roger hissed, pressing his eye to the splintery wood. It was after sunset, and if their mothers realized they weren't home yet, the boys would have been in big trouble. They didn't care, though. They wanted to look at this monstrous fella who lived in the creepy old house at the end of the block, the one who only came out after dark. Thomas Baldhu was known to almost everyone in Shambles. It was a small town, a town built on coal and lumber, and the population was rarely over 20,000. As such, the large and foreboding house at the end of Fortner Lane stood out like a sore thumb in a town of mostly trailers and ranch homes. The house in question was Baldhu's place. It loomed like a gargoyle at the end of the cul-de-sac. No one knew how long it had been there. But some of the kids had seen a picture of the manor in old paintings from the early days of the town. They say it had been occupied by the town's founder, and when he'd been arrested after a string of children had gone missing, someone new had taken up residence there. Someone who only came out after dark. The mob hadn't waited for justice to be served, it was said. They had dragged Thomas from his cell and beheaded him in the street, something that was the custom in certain places. Afterwards, the townspeople had wanted to go and see what sort of things the town's founder had in his now empty home. But when the lights kept coming on and a strange figure was seen around the grounds, they thought the magnificent manor might be haunted. They assumed it would eventually fall to pieces without someone to take care of it, but instead, the house remained. It even seemed to thrive under the care of whoever owned it. People had seen a shadowy figure making changes to the house for years, maintaining the grounds and fixing the damage to the ancient 3-story. But no one had ever met him. That was 100 years ago. And as the town grew up, the house remained as a mystery within Shambles. No one in town still believed the house was haunted, but they knew someone was living there. Whoever they were extremely recluse. When people came to the house, no one ever answered the door. If you approached the person while they were in the yard, they always retreated inside. No one knew who they were or what relation they might have to the old founder. But they did know one thing about the owner of the house, and that was that he loved Halloween. The owner of the house may not be social the other 364 days of the year, but on Halloween, they threw the gates open and passed out the choicest candy and the best tricks. As the boys watched, the yard was always being prepared for the coming holiday. The front porch was festooned with pumpkins. The yard was set with gravestones and half-buried caskets, and the cobwebs and bats were thick in every tree. The trees in the yard always looked skeletal, despite how much attention he paid to the lawn, and they added to the aesthetic of the house. No one could be sure, but everyone was pretty sure that the creepy nature of the homestead was intentional. The wood was dark, painted a deep brown, and stained like dark chocolate. The windows always glowed with something like candlelight, and the house just seemed to lean malevolently. Beyond those gates, it was Halloween every day for whoever lived there. "What's he doing?" Clancy asked. The crack he was peeking through wasn't very wide, and Roger had the better vantage point with his knothole. "He's filling orange bags with leaves for the yard jack-o'-lanterns." "How does he see?" Clancy asked, the scritch-scratch of the man's rake constant as he collected up his medium. "Dunno. Doesn't even have the porch light on. Maybe he's raking by pumpkin light." Clancy wanted to look over the fence, but he didn't dare. Both boys assumed the man would just leave if he thought they were watching, but you could never be sure. When Clancy's mother called his name, the boy, stiffened like a goose, had walked over his grave. They could see the person in the yard stiffen too, looking in the direction of the call as he turned to the fence. In the gathering shadows, they could see that he was dressed in jeans and a sweater, clothes that would look as acceptable for yard work as they would on a homeless man. The garments hung off him, his body thin and emaciated, and people in town thought he might be sick. His voice, however, did not match his appearance. The voice everyone heard when they did business with him was rich, cultured, full of vigor. Many of the women secretly held affection for him, saying his voice sounded like one of the men from the romance novel covers they all read while their husbands were at work. They would have to imagine what his face might look like, though, because he never came into town. He would call the local businesses and tell them he needed supplies delivered to his house about twice a year. Wood, decorations, candy, various and other sundry things that he used to fix up the house or get ready for the holidays. He never called the grocer or the butcher, however, and people weren't sure what he was eating up there. Whatever it was, it kept him going, and he continued to tirelessly work on the house and the grounds by moonlight. "Roger!" came the shrill call from farther down the block. "Roger, it's past curfew, boy. You'd better get home before your dinner gets cold." "Crap," Roger said, taking his eyes off the yard as he turned back towards the home. "She sounds mad." "We better go," Clancy whispered, feeling very exposed in the pool of illumination from the streetlight. "Yeah, it might be a..." "Are you boys quite all right?" said a cultured voice from behind them. Both boys jumped like someone had lashed them with a belt. They looked back, shaking, as the shadow of the stranger fell across them. In the gloom of the yard, he appeared to be a large, thin man, but now he loomed over the boys like a giant from a fable. Both had barely gotten a good look at the stranger before the lamp overhead popped and left them standing in the gathering darkness. Both yelled in terror, scrambling away from the fence as they beat feet up the street for home. As startled by the lamp as the man, he watched them go, his face obscured by gloom, except for his eyes. Both boys would swear later that they had seen two red flickers where his eyes should be. Both boys would also swear that his head had been a grinning skull until the day they died. "It was probably just a mask, Roger," Clancy said as they walked to school the next day. He could still feel the sting his dad put on his bottom for being out past dark, and his mother had scolded him for bothering the nice man who lived at the Baldhu place. "He's never hurt anyone, and he'll never feel like he can introduce himself to the neighborhood if you kids keep bothering him." She had colored a little as she said it, and some of the snap in his father's hand could have been because he'd noticed. Many of the men in town were hoping that the mystery man would stay in his house and leave their wives to their daydreams. "Mask nothing," Roger said. "That was a skull with two red eyes. You and I both saw it." "I don't know," Clancy hedged, not wanting another whipping from his dad for bothering people. His dad had been passed up for another promotion at the paper mill, and he was ornery these days. His mother had tried to console him, saying that he would get it next time, but he'd been sitting in the den with a case of beer in a foul mood lately. "What I know is that someone with a skeleton head is living in our town, and we should let people know about it." "Yeah?" Clancy said skeptically. "And how are we going to do that? Mr. Baldhu never comes out or lets people see him, so how are we going to do anything?" "Just so happens we don't need him to come out. In 2 nights, Mr. Baldhu will open his gates and let kids in to trick-or-treat. He always has a spooky display where he hides so he can give people a good scare. If we can get close, we can snap a picture and get proof. You still got that instant camera?" Clancy nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, but if I break it, running away, my mom will literally kill me. It was a Christmas present, and it..." "We won't break it," Roger assured him. "Once we get proof, we'll be heroes. Imagine how cool it'll be if we snap a picture of the ghost that haunts Baldhu's place." Clancy thought about it, and as he thought of the kids at school chanting his name, he decided it might be worth the risk. He and Roger would be legends, and a reputation like that could take them all the way through middle school. "What's your costume this year?" Roger asked, though it sounded like it didn't matter. "I got a cardboard box robot that I made last year," Clancy said. His dad had helped him make it last year, back when he was in a better mood, and Clancy had added a little more spray paint the following weekend. That had earned him a loud scolding from his dad, too. Apparently, he had used the good spray paint, and not the cheap shit he had bought for him last year. Clancy had said that he was sorry and finished up with the other cans. It looked good now, and the thought that he might not get to wear it made him feel a little sad. It would surely be too small next year. I've got another ninja costume that my grandma gave me for my birthday this year. Mom bought me a new one without thinking about it, and if we go as ninjas, we can make a hasty retreat once we get the picture. The logic was sound to Clancy. Ninjas would be faster than a clunky box robot, and he agreed to meet at Roger's house on Friday night. Bring your camera, don't be late. I want to hit some houses before we go get that big prize. It was edging up on 9 o'clock when the boys got to the gates of the Baldhu place. A few houses had turned into a 3-hour tour of 6 different neighborhoods, and when Roger realized what time it was, he had said a word that would have made Clancy's mom wash his mouth out with soap. The boys had run back to their neighborhood and left their candy at Roger's house before heading out again. Roger's mother had asked if they didn't have enough candy, but Roger said that they had one more house to hit before they packed it in. We have to get candy from Baldhu's house. They have the best treats in town. He had told them to be quick, and the 2 ninjas had headed back into the night. Now that they were standing here before the lair of the beast, Clancy was feeling a little unsure of the plan. Let's just go back, Roger, Clancy begged. We have enough candy, we don't really need to. But Roger stepped into the yard like he hadn't even heard him. Roger intended to get his treat this year. Clancy was left with no choice but to turn around or follow after, and his loyalty to his friend was too great to back down now. The yard was set up like a graveyard, and as they walked towards the house, Clancy jumped as a zombie lurched out of the coffin that had been set up. It growled and roared before descending back down again as it got ready for its next victim. Roger laughed as the kid in the ghost costume jumped in time with Clancy, glancing around to make sure he was the last before proceeding. It was late now, and the boys were the last 2 left on the property. If they were going to make their move, now would be the time. They made their way up the walkway, graves erupting to reveal zombies or skeletons that popped up with a mechanical growling noise. He had really gone all out this year, it seemed, and the boys expected a grave to contain the mysterious Mr. Baldhu at any minute. He would come stomping out dressed as a skeleton or a zombie, and they could trick him into bending down so they could snatch his mask off and reveal his face. Clancy was ready with his camera, and Roger had seen him snap several panic shots as they went. The closer they got to the house without encountering him, the more their nerves jangled. With every crackly, mechanical growl and yowl that split the air, the boys' trepidation rose, and as they mounted the stairs to the house, they felt a cold chill run up their backs. They had come midway when the door to the house opened up, revealing a rocking chair with a headless body seated in it. It held a bucket of candy in its lap, the chair creaking menacingly with every sway of the occupant. "Get the camera ready," Roger whispered, sneaking up to the chair. Clancy nodded, standing just inside the door as he tried to stop his knees from shaking. Roger came up to the bowl, his eyes boring into the headless thing as he reached into the mound of candy. He expected the jump, expected the scare, but he never expected the direction it might be coming from. Clancy watched through the little window, hands shaking as he waited to snap the picture. All at once, Roger shot his free hand from where the head should be on the rocker, trying to find its head. It should be right below the neckline, an easy grab, but as Roger patted the spot and found it solid, he cried out in pain. Something took hold of his rooted hand. He had been so intent on the shoulders, he hadn't bothered to take his hand from the candy bowl. Now something had a hold of it, and Roger was afraid it would tear it off. "Clancy! Clancy, help me!" he yelled. But the door slammed shut, sealing their fate. As the man stood up, Roger pulled his hand free of the bowl, and Clancy screamed in terror as the bloody skull chomped happily at it. It was an old skull, the bones red with blood, and the teeth were turning red as Roger's fingers were ground beneath them. Roger shook it only once, the pain too great to have it move much, and when the meaty snap washed over the boys, the skull hit the ground with nearly half the fingers still in his mouth. Roger fled, pounding on the door, as Clancy sputtered and cried for someone to help them. His camera flashed a few more times, but what it caught was anyone's guess. When the body bent down to get the head, tucking it under its arm, the skull seemed to tut as it worried down the finger into its non-existent throat. Terribly sorry, boys. I know it's bad manners and a touch barbaric, but Bloody Bones here does love his treats on Halloween. I've had a limit to him. Missing children do make such a fuss, but the skull said as its bones turned up abruptly. Halloween is such a hectic time. Sometimes children go missing for one reason or another. The boys cowered as he came towards them, but their screams fell on deaf ears as the blood bones and raw head went about their business. The boys were searched for, but never found. The police came and searched Baldhu's place, but they never found the boys or its mysterious owner. Baldhu's place continued to stand to this day, and every Halloween there's a grand event with candy and decorations. Supplies are still delivered, the bills are always paid, and children sometimes go missing. No one can tell that when the townspeople beheaded Thomas Baldhu, they would create a legacy that would outlast even the town. None of them could know what they would create with the swing of that simple axe, or how it would haunt the town forevermore. I want to remind you guys that I also do narrations over at Chilling. The Chilling app is available for Android, iPhone, and if you'd like to get your hands on the Chilling app and hear myself as well as many other narrators, and they have a whole new setup where you can watch movies on there now, and it's also free to try out with ads now, so you don't have to get a subscription like you used to before. You can actually just get the app, you can start watching on your PC. It's evolved so much since the last time I have updated you guys on this, and sincerely, it's a great place if you want to see more horror, especially if you like horror audio. So strongly suggest you check out the Chilling app. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. So I want to give a very special thank you to Jordan Humble, Diana Kraus, Disciple, Strategy Wolf Emoji, SullyMan, Brandon Mendoza, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Scruffy the Janitor, Brenna Crow, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Djenna, Dante Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, M, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, VerbalHorror, Amber Clark, J. Kearns, Mike, himbojerry, CrusaderChocobo, Dallas, Estebean, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Red Shadowcat, Turtleman, Cryolinian, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Dirt Diver 030, Voice of Sand, Psychomel, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Croconut 509, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Hades Nephew, Acid System, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. I really appreciate your support, and I cannot thank you enough. I wish you all the best. Sweet dreams.